All right, hello, welcome to our podcast. Our project is on Marilyn Monroe and military entertainers. I'm Isabella.
I'm Caroline.
I'm Bridget.
I'm Georgia. Marilyn Monroe was a very famous actress in the 50s who became known as an American icon. She was known for her fashion, her acting, and especially her looks because she was highly sexualized by many men across America.
When Marilyn Monroe was on her honeymoon in Japan with her husband Joe DiMaggio, she was asked to do a 4-day solo tour to the Korean Peninsula where U.S. soldiers were stationed during the Korean War in 1954. During this time, she performed 10 shows for over 100,000 servicemen during her tour at different American military bases in South Korea. And then this situation would begin the ongoing tensions between Marilyn and her husband Joe, which would then lead to their divorce after 8 months of marriage.
But beware when they start to descend. It's then that those louses go back to their spouses. Diamonds are a girl's best.
Also, when reporters asked Marilyn if she wanted to come perform in Korea for the military, her husband would often answer for her and say that they didn't have time on the trip to take time out to do this, but he would answer for her, even though she was the one that could make up her own decisions and could tell if she wanted to go.
In relation to Marilyn and Korea, there was a big I wouldn't say controversy, but topic that women that were working in Korea as they called them bar workers, and they kind of just were materialized as men's entertainment, and they felt used. There was a quote it was an anonymous quote from someone that said, "Women like me were the biggest sacrifice for my country's alliance with Americans." She says, "Looking back, I think my body was not mine, but the government's and the U.S. military's." It was kind of they were not treated like people, they were treated like objects for these men's entertainment, and they were also if you were what they called a bar worker, they would force you to get inspections that would make sure that you didn't have any sexually transmitted diseases that could infect American soldiers, and they were able to get arrested if they didn't have one of these cards present on them. So that was another thing that was not okay, as in they didn't treat them like they were actual people. They treated them like objects and something for their use, for entertainment, which kind of goes back to how entertainers, even in America, all around the world, are not treated fairly at all the times, especially women.
Yeah, going into that, this idea of military entertainment originated during World War I. Basically, America had romanticized the idea of a faraway soldier fighting for the country, and then once the draft started, many were worried that these innocent men would become, quote, drunks and involve themselves with prostitutes. So in turn, there was an organization created called the United Service Organization, otherwise known as the USO, which would send young women to different American bases to keep soldiers entertained by boosting morale and bringing back parts of home, like the women that these men weren't seeing. These women would dance, sing, and just overall just keep these soldiers entertained during this time. And usually they'd be wearing short dresses and perceived as the girl next door. And then this ended up becoming a very highly sexualized position, and wanted to represent the all-American woman, perpetuating very harmful stereotypes and toxic masculinity during this time.
Sort of building off what you two were saying, there's this quote that I found talking about the Korean women that were in the camp towns surrounding the bases where the U.S. soldiers were, and it was saying that the Korean women were conquered nations rather than liberated people, and in many cases these sort of bar women, like Bridget was saying, would have to trade sex for cigarettes, and that also connects back to what Isabella was saying about the U.S. soldiers kind of being immoral, and the need for this kind of bringing back and bring like a piece of America over to try to like bring back the normalcy of life that was lost during these wars.
Yeah, I think that like women, like even though they were highly sexualized during this time, like the performers were highly sexualized, they just saw it as something like a new opportunity for them and having like an impact on the war and having like an impact on the people that were fighting, because they never really got that opportunity before and got the opportunity to be in the war firsthand. So I think that they just didn't realize the effects of it and how it like would affect them in the future too.
I read something that a reporter had asked a question if these women knew what they were getting into when they were like being offered up to these soldiers, and they didn't. They just knew what the opportunity would be like for them, and they thought that it would outcome with something more significant in their lives, more opportunities, which they were really just used. But
Connecting back to the military entertainer aspect of our podcast, obviously performers were notorious for their stage presence and ability to boost morale around camp for thousands of troops. Many people believe that it was the attitude and inspiration that many performers like Marilyn Monroe brought that allowed troops to fight in such harsh conditions for such a prolonged period of time. And the performances brought a piece of home to these stations. However, some performers brought a little more than inspiration and morale to the table. Some performers used other skills to help the soldiers fight and even win in some cases. So there's this performer named Josephine Baker. She was born in Missouri in 1906, and she had undeniable talent. So while finding some success as a performer in America, she struck it big in Paris in the 1920s, where her dancing, singing, and talents were highly esteemed. Baker was often referred to as the Black Venus and was a symbol of beauty in the jazz during the time period. So Baker's platform as a performer for French and British troops during World War II gave her the perfect platform to extend her role in the French resistance. Recruited by Jackie Abti, who is the French Secret Service chief, Abti would use her cover of fame to draw secrets out of the mouths of traitors and other men, and she would help to take down the Nazis. So she basically seduced these men into telling her secrets, and she would report back to the French resistance. And in one instance, Baker disguised her tracking of Axis powers into Portugal and Spain as a South American tour. So she would secure photographs of the Axis powers, movements, and certain locations in her bra, as well as notings like other future expansion plans with invisible ink on her sheet music. And nobody ever thought to search her because she was such a prominent figure in the like entertainment business that it was completely unsuspecting and nobody thought anything of it. So basically, Baker's role in these wars showed that women in these wars often played a larger role than they were credited for. So they helped to gain freedom as well as inspire others, and they deserve to be recognized for their hard work and risk.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think there's not enough recognition, but especially of stories of like these performers who were mistreated, but they also offered up so much to like the country and like to help people.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, going back into like how these military entertainers were being like brought outside of the actual like war aspect. During World War II, they had male soldiers perform these entertainment shows in essentially drag, which is like men dressing in like very highly feminized like clothing and makeup, and then they have like a very like eccentric like attitude, and it's basically just like portraying like a woman but like a lot more like with a lot of like exaggeration. And because there was like at one point like a shortage of women that wouldn't end up like performing for these men, they had to like become creative, so they came up with drag shows. They would do comedy, skilled feminine singing and dancing, and impersonated famous female celebrities, which is essentially what drag is now in the entertainment industry. And then this ended up being brought to Broadway in New York City, and these shows raised like a ton of money for the Army Relief Fund. And then this also shows that like the military entertainment was very like highly feminized, and like it was a very like feminine area, I guess.
I think that just kind of goes to show that women, even if they didn't have the power to really, some women did have a role in the wars and were able to help, but others didn't, and they were just they couldn't do anything about it, but overall women were very influential in the everyday lives of many of the soldiers and the troops, and I think that really shows a lot how important women are to every aspect of life.
Yeah, I feel like it made them feel like they had a purpose and like they were really like helping in the war too,
Yeah.
which was good.
I think at times that could be controversial though, like especially
Yeah.
back then, like how would they be able to go about being influential for like their country or for men? And I feel like that was something that like sometimes was went about in a wrong way, but like in the end it's like impossible to deny that like women did not have an influence.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is sort of sad that they were hypersexualized, but
Yeah. Going back into the like hypersexualization and Marilyn Monroe, her fame did start from this, like, she was a very like hypersexualized woman in the media, and like this is basically just how she got her fame. But using her fame, she basically like helped with the second wave feminist movement. She like broke a ton of standards. She spoke out against gender inequality, like anti-body positivity. She spoke out against like the unequal pay, especially in her industry. And she talked a lot about how the male gaze was very normalized and like how it was like wrong and perpetuated like very bad stereotypes and expectations for women. And not only was she a talented entertainer, she would become an important figure just like in all of culture and pop culture, and inspired many current famous artists and celebrities like Kim Kardashian. In the 2022 Met Gala, she wore Marilyn's dress that she sang to the President of the United States for his for his birthday. And then going into that, she also inspired singer Lana Del Rey in the national anthem music video.
and obviously that goes to show how both Kim Kardashian and Lana Del Rey are both very influential women today, and it just shows the generational influence that women have.
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly that. Basically, all in all, military entertainment had a lot more like significance than it may seem. It did bring a lot of people to stardom, like Marilyn Monroe, and also represented like a lot of different women roles in society and gave women a role, even though it may seem unimportant. It really did add to the whole aspect of wars, especially during World War I and World War II.
I think it's important to also acknowledge the drawbacks as we sort of wrap this up. The drawbacks of having these women be sexualized objects, and obviously that's not the goal, but moving forward, it is, at one point it was necessary to have that in order for women to be necessary and to have a role, so it kind of, the good comes with the bad. So you have to look forward in the new feminist movements and see how we're advancing past the need for that.
Exactly.
Agreed.
So
Thanks for
far.
listening, everyone.